Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and you're really welcome here this evening to a talk by Raul Araujo, who has just flown in from São Paulo in Brazil to be with us. Raul is a psychologist, psychoanalyst, and a social education. He is from, as I said, São Paulo in Brazil, but is no stranger to Ireland, completing his master's in reconciliation studies in Trinity College in 2008. He carried out his psychoanalyst training at the Conghail Forum in London and in child psychoanalyst at the Sede Sapiente in Leuven in Belgium. Raul has worked in prison theatre in Brazil, Ireland and England, and social movements such as the National Movement of Street Children. He coordinated the Border Arts Centre at Deacut, Dundalk from 2005 to 2007. He has solid experience in this area of human rights and has provided consultancy to the European Union, the United Nations Population Fund, Save the Children, the Brazilian Association of Magistrates, Prosecutors and Public Defenders for Children, the International Centre for the Development of Migration Policies, the National Secretariat for Youth, and the National Secretariat for Justice. I got through those. He has worked for 4 years in peace and reconciliation process in Northern Ireland and was a consultant for 4 years for the European Union's Catalyst Children in Science project, among others, from 2010 to 2014. Raul is currently a researcher and a member of the Edward Said Chair at the Federal University of São Paulo. His passion is the rights of children and adolescents and is organizing an international conference on the topic. He is president of the Brazilian Institute for the Rights of Children and Adolescents and works in the favelas in São Paulo, where he founded the Favela de Psychoanalyst, my Portuguese isn't very good here, in 2022, a space for clinical transmission and psychoanalytical policy. Welcome to Raul. Raul is no stranger to either myself or Fiach, whom I always like to welcome here this evening. We had the pleasure of accompanying Brian to São Paulo when he represented Ireland some many years ago. Indeed, Fiach was the curator and I was the museum director after I carried the bags. We will tell you all those stories if you bribe us heavily enough. But needless to say, it was a fascinating time, and we had a marvelous insight into Brazil, into São Paulo, and also into the favelas, because we both went down to the favelas with Brian, and we went to a little place called the Casa Cultura, and this was a small little one up, one down in the favelas in an area, and it was here with independent support from abroad. Was it Manchester or it was from abroad that the children were allowed to be children? They learned to read, to write, to play. And if you looked on it, like if this area of the favela was like this was a little corner up here. But if you did a diagonal down to this area here, the little kids down here were being taught to shoot and, carry drugs. And so it was really the importance of education and allowing children. And I haven't been since, but I think after meeting Raul again this evening, I'm determined to go back sometime. But it was a very, very interesting trip. Again, I just say to welcome to Raul. And then I would also like to thank Cleo Fagan, our education curator, for organising this evening and for organising Raul to be with us. We were also supported by Eugene Downs and the Department of Foreign Affairs, and I'd like to thank them very much. I'd also like to welcome Fiach here this evening, who is going to join us for the Q&A. And of course, Brian Maguire, the artist, for this superb exhibition, La Grande Illusion, which has been the catalyst for this evening's talk, and for many other events, including our forthcoming international symposium, Eyewitness, which we're holding on the 20th of March. And also like to tell you, we have a beautiful catalogue accompanying this exhibition, which is on sale in the bookshop, which is open now. So after the talk this evening and the Q&A, you might like to bring a souvenir, and I'm sure Brian would be delighted to sign some copies. And so it is now my great pleasure to invite Raul Araujo to talk to us this evening. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much, Barbara, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here tonight among so many friends. So first of all, I want to thank Brian Maguire, my friend that brought me here first time in 2002 to work in Portlaoise, in a prison in South Dublin. And I don't know. And so also I have so many friends here tonight that I also want to thank them. So Juliana, the good friend from Brazil, Michael Ryan, via Lennox Cunningham, Mel Alon, and Coffee, and Sharon Macardo. So all my friends that, among many others that are here, to celebrate this night and to celebrate Brian's work. So I want to, the topic that I put down there, I had so many ideas, and I wrote so many papers actually this week. So Sharon's laughing there because I was taking notes. Actually, I lost my computer this week, so I went to the old notebook, and then I got my computer back, and so I could write down a few things. But I will start to introduce myself, as Fiach suggests, to you, and also make some connections with the work here. So I studied in the university in São Paulo. Juliana was with me in the same university, which was a very kind of, it is still kind of left-wing progressist university. So we did lots of work with young people and communities. And it was a time also that after 24 years of military regime, we had the opening in Brazil. So it was 6 years after, 6 years after the end of the military regime in Brazil. So we had so much hope there. And I was working in a prison in Brazil, the biggest prison, where there was a massacre there. 111 prisoners was killed. And of course it was horrible. People say that was much more. So I went to work there just after the massacre. So I'm thinking about, I met a prisoner, a former prisoner another day that was in the massacre, that when I was working there, I had an argument with him. And I didn't know the risk that I was taking by having arguments with someone that just went through a massacre, you know. But we have so many hopes, and was also that time that we had the first Workers' Party government in São Paulo city, and we had Paulo Freire as a head of education. So we had this opportunity to work with prisoners through Paulo Freire's methodology while he was being the head of education for this São Paulo city. It was a great experience, and I started to work there with also Theatre of the Oppressed. So we had also AIDS and HIV epidemic, and we create this methodology through Theatre of the Oppressed to discuss situations that they put themselves at risk. So that was the beginning of my career, you know, almost 32 years ago. So, and actually I had no interest. Of course I would go to gigs, but I had no interest in theater, drama, or whatever. So it was through the prisons and with that task to work with prisoners, to think about situations that they put themselves at risk, that I end up working with Theatre of the Oppressed. And that was how I met Brian Maguire. So Brian went for the Biennale in 1998 to Brazil to represent Ireland in the São Paulo Bienal. And the topic of Bienal was anthropophagy. Does it make sense? Anthropophagy? So anthropophagy is when someone eats someone else. So many groups around the world, they eat other people in order to get that knowledge. And in Brazil, we had this modernist movement based in anthropophagy, the idea that we would eat the Europeans to create our own art. So that Biennale was celebrating anthropophagy. And for Brian, anthropophagy was social class, eating social class. And he approached me to bring him to the prison to talk to the prisoners. So I went to translate. My brother asked for this help. My brother also works with me. And we end up doing different type of works there and having fun. I think, working with Brian is always having fun. I was supposed to talk about some of his theories tonight, but he said I'm not allowed. So, actually, I want to ask an excuse that I'm with this Brazilian accent, but that will be the accent in Ireland. I'm very happy with the buses here, all of them are green and yellow, the Brazilian flag. There are Brazilians all over the place. So when I talk to Republicans, they say that the conflict would end because the Catholic community, they have more babies. But with us here, Brazilians will take over the island. So we have to be used to our accent here. Just a little joke, but the joke is also related to the topic I'm talking about. Let me see how I do it. So that's how I ended up meeting Brian, and I took part in this project that basically Brian took pictures of, first of all, he made drawings about the children in the favelas. And then he would give the drawings to the children, and we'd take pictures of the drawings in their houses. That was part of the show. Then the second part of it was he created paintings of the some news papers, police pages, where he took the police pages. For him, those pictures were about how you judge someone and turn someone from that beauty that we could see in the drawings of the children into someone else, into a criminal. Even if the person is not involved in any crime, once you have that picture, you are sentenced. So that was Brian's words at that time. And then the last piece was a big painting about this massacre in Brazil. So he made this big painting. We got pictures from the newspaper there, Estado de São Paulo, and he made this. So since then, we have been collaborating in many projects. I will talk a little bit about one that we are just collaborating right now. The year after the Biennale, we did a big project in São Paulo called Staging Human Rights, which we work with 37 prisons in Brazil, with male, female prisoners and prison guards. And we create a small place about human rights violations for them. So we had many places, 200 small places over 2 years. And at the end, we have a show in the Latin American Parliament in São Paulo, and then Brian came over. And then I was invited to come after to working with political prisoners in Portland. After 1 month working there, I didn't, so that's all about bureaucracy and security, and so I didn't get clearance for going into the prison. So I couldn't work with them anymore. And I was here for 3 months. So at that time I worked with different groups here. So travelers, people from West Cork. Was very difficult to understand those young people. Like, was 1 week there, I was tired, I couldn't understand anything. But they were very nice to me, and they were taking care of me because I couldn't understand them full. But then I got used to the language, and there are different languages here in Ireland. So then I did lots of work for Create, a community art organization here in Dublin, with Wes Wilkie, that was the head of this unit. And through that work, they invited me to work in a module for the Cross-Border Center in Dundalk. And I wrote down that module, was 13 weeks course in art and conflict. So the course was based in Paulo Freire's idea, Boal's idea, and also in Pichon Riviere's ideas, the Argentinian group psychoanalyst. So then in 2005, I came over to run the course, and I met Mel, a few others that are here, and we run that course, and the year after, I ended up being the arts coordinator for the Border Arts Center, and we had many projects, workshops with communities along the border. So it was a great learning from me that I was here, meet so many people learning about conflict, about life, and so many things. And so after that, I went back to Brazil and I worked with Boal as a director of his center just before he passed away for 1 year, but I was very homesick. And I went back to São Paulo, where I'm based right now. And nowadays I work as a consultant and institutional analyst that work with institutions to reflect on their practice. And I work with children's rights in this organization that we will have this conference next year. And I'm happy that we already have some people very interested. The Youth Center in the dock want to send some children to São Paulo. The people from the Shankill Road want to send some people to São Paulo. Kids from Donegal might be coming. So I think it will be a very interesting meeting with kids from all over Brazil, from Amazon, to discuss their rights. And I think all my work, even with Theatre of the Oppressed and Pedagogy of the Oppressed, is related to the right of having a voice and being heard. And I think that's very difficult nowadays. So, of course, we have access to internet, media, but also excess of information is lack of information. So we've been seeing it with fake news about, we've seen it in the pandemics, about the vaccine, about many other things. We've seen it about politics in general, and it's very hard to address what people are going through. So that's probably is the main topic of my talk tonight. Just the first part of my talk is about globalization. Of course, most of us have had debates about globalization and how what we call global is named by someone. The global is an idea of the globe. And so, for instance, when people say, you are from Latin America, for example, that's an assumption of culture that we have the same culture in Latin America as, for instance, Europe. when we say Europe, we include the Irish and we include the Germans. And for sure they are very different, starting from the breakfast, you know. And so those assumptions is a way of naming people and place people in certain places. So that's a kind of a division of our society. So when we talk about globalization, we can talk about many aspects. I will highlight at least 3 aspects of globalization. First of all is interdependence among countries. So in order to assemble a car, we need a tire from, I don't know, Hong Kong, and wheel from West Cork, and I don't know, the technology from United States, whatever. So in order to create a car, we need so many countries working, and of course, there is so many different payments in different countries. But of course, what's hidden also there is those parts of the car is made from natural resources. So water, what else? Plastic, oil. So we need natural resources. Those resources is finite. You cannot produce more as we produce any other thing. So there is an end for water, there is an end for oil, and that's a challenge that we're facing right now. The second aspect of globalization is commodification. So everything turns into a commodity. So for instance, I spent last week in Carlingford, this beautiful place, with Sharon, a friend of mine that's here, she's here. So I can buy rump steak. You know, rump steak is the best part of the meat in Brazil. So we make great barbecues with rump steak that we call picanha. So before, first time I came to England, I couldn't buy meat. It was very expensive here. And nowadays, it's the same price in Carlingford and in São Paulo for 1 kilo of rump steak. The difference that most of the rump steak in the world is produced there, of course, and we have rump steak here, but here you earn much more than us. So that's the outcome, one of the outcomes of commodification. The third aspect of globalization is the symbolic aspect of it. So when you call someone black, or someone white, or someone that's English, or British, or Latin American, you make an assumption of them and put them in a category, in a set of meaning that define them. So for instance, if you, like the Irish as a terrorist, for example. So the Irish was portrayed as a terrorist all over the world. And if you are not, or if you are terrorist, that would represent you at that time, not anymore. The same thing goes with how we define the world. So in the past, you know, America was divided between the Tordesillas Treaty, divide America between Spain and Portugal. Without that, they never, like, most of Spanish and Portuguese people never been to most of the areas of America, but they could divide that in the middle and decide who owns what. Like now Trump wants to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico into Gulf of America, you know? And Google, I read, said that in Google Maps, you'll find now Gulf of America. But those things are not just words, you know? When I can say, and of course you know that better than me. If I say dairy, there is a meaning. If I say Londonderry, there is another meaning. If I say Dundalk, there is one meaning. If I say Deldergan, sorry about my Irish, there is another meaning. So the way we change the words and you change the meaning of the place and the meaning of the people is a way also to diminish them, to make them inferior in order to control and explain exploitation. So that's happened to the Africans. That was brought to America, most of them to Brazil, and work as slaves there. So in order to have a slavery, we need a justification to exploit them. So that's the symbolic aspect of globalization. So that's the third aspect that I want to address with you. And as you may know, name comes from a word in Greek that nomos. Nomos in ancient Greek means law. So this first idea of ruling, of law, comes from name. So when I name that something is green, means that something is not blue. So it's the first aspect of legislation and law, giving names to people, to things, to place. So we create a division and a system of rule when we name things. So it's very important who is naming it and why they are naming it. So, as you may know, at the end of the Cold War, this guy became very famous. He wrote this idea of the end of history. So Francis Fukuyama, he had this idea that, history develops through dialectics. So there is no more opposition to capitalism. Now we would have only capitalism and cultural democracy. That was his idea. And his professor, Samuel Huntington, this American sociologist, who wrote this book, The Clash of Civilizations, in which he predicted that the new conflicts would be conflicts among identities. And then he divided the world: Latin Americans, Europeans, Asians, Chinese, Japanese. And we don't know how he divided that. But one may criticize that theory, saying that it's a stupid theory, but we can argue that was a self-fulfilling theory, and more than that, it was a North America policy to influence countries, as we may know that, all the British colonies, they had division, Tamil and Sinhalese, dark Celtics, white Celtics, all those divisions, and in order to divide, to conquer. We know that very well. But I think what's different right now is we have been polarized small differences, as Sigmund Freud would put it, in order to create conflict and dominate people. So, as a result of those divisions, we have a system of identities right now that we are always fighting against the other identity. And I will give you some examples of that. So we start with the identities that we already have. So loyalists, Republicans, Irish, Tamils, Sinhalese. But then we move to and women, cis and trans, different lights of blacks, so colorism. Of course, I'm not saying those issues are not very important. They are very, very important, and we actually, even in our organization, we stand for that and we fight for those issues. But what I'm trying to address here is the importance of identities and the importance of, I would say, the public discussion about issues that concern everyone. And then I go back to my points about globalization to demonstrate that. Last year in Brazil, the Brazilian government invested 522 billion reais in the agro industry. So to plant soya, corn, all type of grains, and also cattle, beef, pork, chicken. And we were the biggest exporter in the world of those things: soya, corn, chicken, beef, and pork. But at the same time, we had 29 million people starving. And there was no word about that in the public arena. Of course, we fight for the rights of women, we fight for the rights of blacks, we fight for the rights of LGBTQ+, sorry. But I think that agenda is not only our agenda, but also the right-wing agenda in the opposite way, pushing that debate. And there is no language to discuss hunger, for example. And actually, we have the opposite right now in Brazil. We have quotes on, and for sure you get them here also, talking about that you can't be rich. It's just, you have just to change your mind, your set of ideas, and then you can be rich. So we had a candidate in Brazil running for São Paulo State. No one knew him. And suddenly he came almost second in the election, selling those ideas. You can be rich. And of course, like, we can work with people in favelas and work with them in different theories and contexts. But for sure, in most of favelas in Brazil, people would talk about being rich. And through those ideas, through entrepreneurship and how to be an entrepreneur. And so I've been talking about all those things here, and you might be thinking, there is those things to do with art. And with this exhibition here, I don't know if you had the opportunity to see the exhibition. But in my opinion, there are many things to do with art, because I think art is a way of creating language. And as Jacques Rancière puts it, and also Brian's in his video there, if you see the video, say, somehow art has no value. You know, if you have a BMW there, people would value it. But if you say you are an artist, you have this painting here, there is not the same interest. Of course, the art world, there is pictures that are worth millions. But the arts can create a common ground that we can share ideas, we can share perspectives, we can share views. As Jacques Rancière, this French philosopher, puts it, theater asserts disrupt space and identities and time, delegitimating any hierarchical order that may exist among them. So the characters in theaters can talk to anyone, and you can play any character. Theater is directly linked to democracy and politics. Military order, oligarchy, and aristocracy maintain the fiction that some individuals cannot occupy some spaces in the social order. Whereas politics, in contrast, seeks to give a share to those without a share in the distribution of what is seen and felt, the distribution of the sensible. For Jacques Rancière, politics coincide with democracy and theater. It disorganizes the ordering of human communities. As Aristotle enumerated 3 forms of community: the community of wealth, the few; the community of virtue and excellence, the best, aristoi; and the freedom of the people, demos, the people of those without a share, disrupt the order of the domination by good men or property owners, by introducing the people as a destabilizing element in that order. I like this quotation. That's, I think, part of Brian's work, the idea of making portrait. So in the past, who had their portrait made was just the kings and the lords of the land. And part of the work of Brian's is the work of create pictures of those who we cannot see, of those are invisible for the society, or of those that we name them as inferior, as less than us. Of course, we can walk into this door and say, they are not poor things, or these people in South America, they are terrible. Loads of corruption out there in Africa and other countries. Of course, we can have this attitude, this patronizing attitude, and say that there is nothing to do with me. But I will tell you an anecdote that I've heard the first time in Guernica, and then by different people here in Ireland. And this anecdote tells us that a German officer visited Picasso's studio in Paris, and during the Second World War. And then this officer saw this big picture, loads of violence there. It was Guernica. And then he asked him, "Did you do that?" And then Picasso replied, "No, you did that." So I invite you to walk and see the show with this attitude. It's not about them, it's about us. So thank you very much.
That was great. Well, thank you very, very much.
Of course, Brian Maguire.
Of course, Brian Maguire, artist, yeah. Not insignificant there. So thank you very much. That was really a very interesting and illuminating talk. Fiach, we were going to ask a few things. I was just struck by, you sometimes think globalization would, build an understanding, people traveling, getting to know the others. But it's really here, it and identity are being weaponized rather than, encouraging community or an understanding, which I thought was very interesting in that talk. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and thank you for the talk. And I suppose my relationship with Brian Maguire has allowed me to begin to not look at the world as a globalized unit, which is what Raul spoke about. I've had the privilege of eavesdropping, that's the word, at Brian's work in his studio in Paris over the last 10 years, seeing some of this work being half made, half discussed, looked at. And I suppose the reason I ran the Project Art Centre in the mid-90s, where we were consumed quite rightly with the idea of Irish identity and what it meant in relation to the other being Britain, but also to try and understand of the various mediums of art that could be used, whether it's sound or video, sculpture, live art, installation. And painting was taking a little bit of a backseat in the 90s, and I probably would have been one of the primary kind of supporters of that for a while, okay? But the identity issue was a lot of Irish artists were moving abroad, a lot of Irish artists were moving to London, maybe the same is happening now, except it's Berlin. And but at that we also became aware of the fragmented, we became aware of the visibility of the fragmentation of Irish society, in particular the periphery. And having shown Alistair MacLennan and Jackie Irvine at Venice, I started having discussions about painting again, strangely. And Brian told me about the time that he was instrumental in my grandfather being turfed out of the National College of Art. My grandfather was Maurice McGonigal, who was a professor and director of the College of Art. And this man here, along with many other students, got rid of him and he resigned. So I had this kind of strange thing with Brian. But when I considered São Paulo as the other, and when I considered Brazil, and we would use the word Latin America at the time a lot, and I considered São Paulo and Brazil as coming out of what you eloquently spoke about, coming out of the military junta. I wanted to challenge painting, and I wanted to challenge a painter about how they would be able to respond quickly. And this is maybe my kind of quickly to events, or indeed to the other, to the identity of what I thought was happening in Brazil at the time. And that challenge was Brian Maguire. I felt Brian's activism, Brian's, I suppose, laser ability to identify the vulnerable and the unjust, and not to embarrass the rest of us in acknowledging that. So while the activism was there and the kind of campaigning was there was a tremendous sense of love with Brian's work. And I took a chance on a painter responding to a contemporary art market, really, where artists can make it and artists can all the dealers around. And it was a chance we took, and with the support of Barbara Dawson at the time, who was on the CRC committee, I think I remember, and Peter Murray and so forth, and the Curlin. And also want to acknowledge the presence in the room of the brilliant Jenny Houghton, who was the administrator of the Biennale at the time, for Ireland at the time. And I asked Brian to respond, to tell us what was happening in the other side of the world. Okay, I didn't know what the answer was, but to tell us. And I think he's doing that to this day. He's telling us, as we go through each of these wonderful rooms, he's telling us not to weaponize identity, not to be general, not to use the Latin American phrase to actually just to kind of humanize what's going on. And I love that phrase that the importance of identities, but also it's in the Catholic essay to memorialize the unremembered. And the journey from Sao Paulo to here, I think, is something that I think we've all learned from. Does that make any sense to you, Brian?
Yeah, it's just interesting that we were driving around this city today and talking, and I recalled the Apagadas project that you are father of and brought to me, which meant painting portraits of people who are disappearing, also people who were disappeared as well. How that led directly to the work I did with the femicides in Juarez, which led directly to the American Indian work, the Native American work. Everything, like most artists, Tuesday follows Monday, and as your work develops over your life, there's a direct connection between the one that went before. I don't know if that's the answer to the question you asked me.
Well, I think what you said there is very interesting, Fiach, is that Brian doesn't embarrass us when we look at these works. He kind of brings us into the conversation. And I think that's really, really powerful. It's very interesting. If I use the word seductive, I mean it in the most positive sense, because you walk through these rooms and you see these beautiful paintings, these wonderful colors, and then you see the message, and the message which is the hard-hitting message. And as Brian himself said, that is, the subject is the message, the painting is the hope. And that's the thing, it's very, very tough. Gallery 5 is really tough, but you come out of it thinking rather than just wanting to run away and jump into the Liffey. You come out of it thinking, and I think, and also the important thing about art, particularly visual art, whichever format, I know you were talking about film and video and then painting, is that it is a record as well, and it's a testament, and it can't be hidden away, like these are big paintings. They're now documented here. Many of them will travel to Tampa in Florida for another exhibition and perhaps other places. And I think that's also the power of, in Brian's case, the power of the painting, which he has manipulated into a very powerful message. And if you think back to the 90s, I know exactly what you mean. There was sort of very exciting work being done in the other visual arts media. But I think Brian is one of those who shows that age-old tradition of painting can still be a powerful, it's like the historic paintings of centuries past that we still look on and learn from.
Brian, you want to?
I was just going to say that the idea of identity, it's a better way of saying what I'm trying to say. You draw somebody. Everywhere I've made the drawing, the person understood, whether they were 4 years of age or 74, they knew what was going on. They understood that it's a collection of lines that tell your unique story. It's a very simple way of emphasizing identity, is to make a drawing of someone.
Well, can I just say, just to respond to that, Brian, you've kind of you've inverted the tradition, the classical tradition of the portrait.
Yeah,
No,
I do that.
I just would ask questions.
Would like to invert. I mean, my understanding of the world that I live in, Ireland, is that the Ministry of Justice is they administer injustice, education hides, and so on and so forth. So if you can invert them, you'll get to somewhere good.
So how did that emerge in your practice around the portrait, the portraiture?
It's just that the portrait belongs to the rich and famous. So I remember I started making portraits in prison because it was, I mean, in prison you might just have a number, you don't necessarily have a name. It may have changed now. At one time you had numbers. The idea of painting a portrait of somebody who has been locked up for 40 years because of the sentence, huge sentences were given out at one time. The idea of making the portrait is to celebrate the individual, not to hide them away. You know, so it's the opposite.
Yeah, let me take it. I think what Brian's talking about singularity and the way he's too loud. Yeah. About singularity. So the way the relationship with the person he's painting, he can get something from the person that's unique.
Yeah.
And then present them in a different way. And Walter Benjamin, the critique of industrial art, I don't know how to call the reproductive art.
Mechanical reproduction.
Reproduction. So of course there is this expression of singularity, but also I think in his pictures, he's more than a visual artist, he's a storyteller. In a way he tells stories about himself, but also about people. And I think that's also very important to bring another aspect of identity. So if you talk about Irish identity, you would think about Pat, you know, it's kind of representation of Irish identity. But like yesterday, I was coming from Belfast, and then the bus broke down in Newry. And then my friend Sharon went to pick me up there, and we gave a lift to 2 people. And one boy that was with us, he said, "Are you Brazilian?" I said, "Yes." And then he went, "I'm half Brazilian," with this northern accent, you know. So his father is from Minas Gerais, and he's Irish. So we should include in the Irish identity, and he's living on myth. So we should include in the Irish identity him. His name was James, was it? Yeah, James. So as the song say, you know, Dublin keeps on changing, nothing seems the same. So we should be able to represent it. And I think art is a way to break up this kind of repetitive identity without excluding, for example, the Queen Maeve or the myth and the tales from Ireland. And of course, we should tell them with another accent or in a different ways, or merge with orishas from Brazil and see how it goes. So the problem with identity, when the situation has changed, but we keep repeating the same idea of what we want to represent.
You mean the stereotypical?
Yeah.
I would like to see that certainly through the arts, through the spoken word, and when you see our new nationals here reading Irish or reading poetry, or even older poetry like Yeats or something, it's very moving. I think that the arts can bring that together, the concept and the reality of New Ireland, and that. I suppose, encompassing of identity, but bringing with that, of course, everything that's in the country where we live, like the old mythology and the art forms, because I think it's through art forms rather than commerce or, which are important economy, but I think it's the arts that have that capacity. People talk about soft power. I mean, the power of it should never be underestimated, because I really do think that that's the way, that expression. And people get it, they hear it, they can see it, they don't have to kind of intellectual, and then they identify if you're drawing on ancient Ireland or the past, as well as, of course, hip hop and what's going on at the moment.
We'll speak for about another 10 minutes and then we'll open it up for questions. Barbara, I just want to ask you, I mean, you're a strong and consistent supporter of Brian Maguire, the artist, and this is the second major, enormous, epic exhibition. You've had the last one, I think, is Inside Out around 2000.
Yeah.
I love the fact, first of all, this is free. It's our civic space. This is owned by the city. Now, I know Brian is kind of Wicklow, really, but we'll park that for a second. But the fact that the collection has been shifted aside to open up this space for work that is essentially about the global, right? It's none of this work is situated in and I suppose I'm inversing the conversation we've had before about identity and but this is work about the international.
The international, but the international also has a national. We have the central bank. We've one piece, the central bank. Yeah, and then I always think that's really important as well because we are from somewhere and you can always nail it down to the country you're in. You know, the way we show this show will be very different from where anybody else shows it. Yes, I have had the honor of knowing Brian like you for a long time and we're still alive. We live to tell the tale of an extraordinary, accomplished and brilliant artist. The museum is a place where, for want of a better word, you leave your prejudices at the door, you leave your guns at the door, you leave everything at the door, and it's a place that should be for debate, open debate between, it can be fractious, it can be topical, whatever. And we like here to have spaces where everybody can come in, no matter what your thinking is or what your feelings are, and that here in these spaces, the voices can be heard and also then the art can express itself. And one of our, we do support leading Irish artists, and one of our leading Irish artists, quite obviously, is Brian Maguire. And we've always had a thread of theme through here is that socio-political interest, which is fascinating. You're talking about the 90s. It comes out of our own looking at our own identity and then the identities of others. And we did Inside Out, which was a great exhibition back then. And I think this, I can see exactly, it's a continuum for Brian. And this is such a powerful exhibition of what is going on now. We're talking about injustices and human rights and social injustices, political injustices. But with Brian, the work questions, why have we cartels? Where did they come out of? So what happened that there was no other way out? Or that's not an excuse. What I'm trying to say is that we know that there's both social injustice, political corruption, and sometimes this drives people underground rather than lifting them up. And that's always been a topic. And also, it's a great museum here, so we like artwork that eventually will be historic. We have several paintings of Brian in the collection, which over time, a bit like, let's say, Francis Bacon, they kind of no longer are contemporary, they recede into history. But they're always there, and the message is very strong. So with always the very exciting journey with Brian, sometimes quite tiring, it's always really, really worth it. And I think that this exhibition has shown that, and that the gallery and our audiences enjoy such interesting dialogue through painting.
Raul, just to pick up on something you didn't mention, but you're clearly an expert and a practitioner in children's rights and art, and you're working on current projects. Can you just expand a little bit on your current contemporary thinking about children's rights, your expertise in Augusto Boal's Theatre of the Oppressed, and what your current projects in São Paulo, please?
Yeah, we have this. I've been working with children's rights in Brazil since I was in college, and of course, for many different reasons, Brazil we wrote our Bill of Rights at the same time that the conventions in the UN Convention was written. So they start in 79 and they finish in 89. And at the same time, we were writing our convention. And it was the street children that demonstrate the need of that convention. So we had a period of industrialization from the 50s to the 70s. Brazil completely changed. We were a rural country and we became an urban country. And of course, loads of people came from Northeast Brazil to Southeast Brazil to work in factories and without any facility, without any rights. And loads of children end up in streets. And for, of course, the representation of them that they would be from poor families that couldn't support them. And then we had big orphanages with children. So we were able to, the street children movement was very big in Brazil, all over Brazil. And in 86, they occupied the Congress with, of course, many adults helping them to ask for the Bill of Rights. And then we have our Bill of Rights published just, I think, 7 months after the convention. And we've been working in the implementation of our Bill of Rights that had a big impact. So we don't have orphanage. Like I did a placement when I was in college with 300 children in one orphanage. And they placed me in one room with 60 babies. I didn't know what to do with 60 babies that they wouldn't cry because no one picked them up. So I was working in the prison at that time. I wasn't afraid to go to the prison. Everyone say, yeah, we're afraid to go to, I was afraid to go to that room with those kids. So that's changed a lot. Now we have houses for 15 kids. We have a justice system that completely changed. And there was a big impact on the Brazilian children's situation. Still we have laws to implement. At that time, also health wasn't a right for everyone. Just in 1988, everyone has the right for health, social welfare. And so all of this was implemented the last 24 years, and we still implement that. So, and I think one thing that's very important is the children's voice and the children's participation. Of course, we have many specialists that can talk about children for hours and hours and hours, but then they are not able to listen when they say, I want to stay with my family, and you have to do something about it. They cannot hear that. And in many other situations, formal legal situations, and also in schools. And so we had a meeting. We have this organization that was set up actually by judges in 68. It was progressist judges that set up that organization. And in 2017, it became open for everyone. And now we are focusing in children's participation. So last year we had 138 children coming together to discuss their rights, children from all over Brazil. And we did that in a space from the landless movement in Brazil. And this year in October, we'll have this meeting that children from all over Brazil and from Ireland and Palestine, Argentina, and probably some other country will come to discuss what they want from the adults and for their rights. And also we will discuss methodology, and we will have a debate about that. We have specialists coming also, like Laura Landi, that you know, a person from Belfast. Many other people, so Cheryl McCardle, that she's here, she has a module in DCU, work with theater, work with the convention through drama, with teachers, so she might come and help us there also. So the idea to explore the voice of the children. And that's what we're going to be doing in October this year.
And yourself and Brian are cooking up something, are you?
We have a project about called Globalized, which is Portuguese for erasure, and it's a portrait project, which between us we have text and image of people who have been erased, which range from a kidnapped daughter, a man who was put in jail, lost everything, to the ex-president, the lady who came after Lula's first period of office, was agreed. She was impeached illegally by Bolsonaro and removed. So she became eligible for the project through that action. So yes, we have a project.
Okay, so before I'm going to ask.
Yeah. It wasn't by Bolsonaro, but it was fine.
My,
Wasn't by Bolsonaro, but yeah, it was replaced. Yeah.
my final question for Brian is, like, we're seeing you mapping the world here. Okay, what's next?
Instinctively, it's a very bad idea to answer that question. But it seems very difficult not to go to Palestine. We'll see.
Because what's interesting, and if you have some time, the video is very good. You spoke quite eloquently about projects that don't work in terms of, in other words, your activism and your art. And so Sri Lanka was one of that, right? Yeah. Could you just unpack that a little bit?
What about Sri Lanka?
Yeah.
I was part of the foundation of the Irish Forum for Peace in Sri Lanka and various things. And I wanted to go and make work about what was happening to Tamils. And indeed, I came very close to research which would have enabled that. But what happened was the Sinhalese army annihilated the leadership of the Tamil people at the beach. They just killed them. And, you know, it was a bit like Newry. Remember after Bloody Sunday, there was a massive march in Newry. Nobody ever walked after that. That was it. And it was on a massive march in Paris with the Tamils, and slowly the whole thing. What happens is that any project requires money, access, some security, and time. And if all those things don't fall into place, you can't do it. And you take that as a sign, and you go after the one that you can do. And that really, the projects that are represented here were all lucky to happen. They just were fortunate that there was money and time to do the research and do the work.
And surely with your trip to Aleppo, there was more obstacles?
I mean, Aleppo was Aleppo. I was thinking about going to Aleppo for 6 years, and I never saw. And then suddenly, a visa fell into my hand, thanks to Colin Lina, you know, and off we went. It's just it broke within a week, and.
Okay, just to conclude, so I want to thank Barbara Dawson and Michael Dempsey, the co-curators of this exhibition, and Hugh Lane. Thank you very much. I want to thank in particular Raul Araujo for being here and for a wonderful, stimulating speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And finally, I want to thank the citizen of the world, Brian Maguire.